You're listening to Storytime on channel15radio.com. Old time radio for a new era. Thank you for joining us. In this series, we feature Terry Morgan reading from her work, The Ambassador, a fun, family-friendly sci-fi martial arts adventure. The Ambassador is an accomplished older woman who brings together a tight-knit team to protect the local neighborhood. Together, they must find a way to stop the invading Olmeri. In this episode of The Ambassador, we'll learn about the Central Alliance and the Masters of Ras'alhague. The High Council gives First Contact Ambassador Micha Lawrence a dangerous new assignment. She gets a new ship and, to her surprise, a new captain. Before I start reading, I'd like to offer some insights and some background on what I'm doing with the characters and the story. When I started writing the stories, I was bored. I wanted to go somewhere. I wanted friends to go with, so I wrote a short story. A friend liked it. That story turned into 8 books. The Ambassador is a sci-fi story, but it's not about who has the fastest ships or the biggest guns. It's about us. It's about being human. Time passing and what we leave behind are the essence of the story. Who inherits what we've learned? We grow up, we learn, we get older, we pass on what we have learned to the next generations. That is true for all of us. Those shared experiences are part of the story. We all need to eat and sleep. We also need friends, the friends that show up no matter what. The friends who lend a hand to help us or to stop us, the ones we can always count on. Not many of us have those friends these days. The ways our lives change in the modern world means lifelong friends are rare. That is part of what motivated me to create the characters in the stories. I could create fictional characters who would always show up. I spent some time working out who exactly the characters were, how they relate to each other, and how they connect with each other. One of those ways is through their location. The story takes place in the local neighborhood. That's what astronomers call the region of space near our sun. It's also a real location on Earth. I grew up playing in my local neighborhood. All the kids would gather in the big yard across the street and play ball until it got dark and we couldn't see the ball anymore. Then someone's mom would call. In the fictional world of the Ambassador, the kids don't go out to play the same way as we did, but they do go out to play. Imaginary worlds with secrets and swords and magical jewels are fun for adults too. More than play, I wanted characters who were good at what they do. The ones who have the ability, skills, and courage to help others. In the Ambassador's universe, excellence is expected. Integrity and honor matter. Trust is earned. Wits matter more than firepower. Friends are the best. Everybody gets a seat at the table, and the good guys win most of the time. They are the best of the best. They aren't broken. They aren't perfect. They are very good at what they do. But there's more to the story and the characters than what's on the surface. The long history and traditions of Chinese martial arts are the foundation. The lore of the stories in the Masters of Ras'alhague is my version of the Masters of the Nine Mountains from Chinese martial arts lore. The Ambassador and her 4 old friends embody the 5 elements of Xing Chuan: metal, water, wood, fire, earth. Their special skills, the colors they choose for their formal robes, and their very nature are based on these elements. These connections are developed and revealed throughout the stories. When we first meet the Ambassador, she's getting older. She'd like to retire. She'd like to find someone she could really teach, not just someone who wanted to dabble, someone who wanted to learn. But she can't. The High Council has called her for a dangerous and secret new assignment. The Ambassador must go to distant Kalen, get a treaty, and stop an Olmeri incursion. She's been given the Magellan, the best ship in the Alliance, and to her surprise, a new captain. They embark on their first mission together, and gradually they reveal more about themselves and their universe. There are 15 featured characters in the first book. The later books have 23. Keeping them distinct was a challenge. It was fun, too. The story spans 50 years in the lives of the ambassador and her 4 old friends, how they meet, become friends, grow older, and how they pass on what they have learned. That's what we do in the real world, too. We meet people who become our friends. We develop those friendships over time. The characters in the story are brilliant and humble, honest and kind. They are excellent at what they do. They are the heroes we'd all like to be and the friends we'd all like to have. I'll be right back. Now, The Ambassador by Terry Morgan. Read by Terry Morgan. An accomplished older woman leads a tight-knit team to protect the local neighborhood. Together, they must find a way to stop the invading Olmeri from taking over. Good friends, good food, good times, and some bad guys in our local neighborhood. Dedicated to my mom, the lady who raised me, and to all the little girls like me whose dreams are never big enough for their imaginations. Terry Morgan, 5/24/2021. We are here. The Ambassador presents a grounded vision for a hopeful future and who we could become. When I first started writing the books, a friend read an early version. He liked the story and the characters, but he wasn't quite sure about the location. I explained that we were in the local neighborhood. Where's that? He wanted to know. So I set about creating a map showing the stars and their relative positions, how to orient the map, where to put the stars, which stars should be included. I looked at distances and colors. I looked at maps of stars that were a little further away than our closest neighbors, but not too far. I found the pulsar map Frank Drake created. The stars fell into place. Now I had something I could show my friend, point to, and say, we are here. Chapter 1, Departure Day. The wind will tell its story whether you are listening or not. Where do you want to go? It whispers. Who are you? It asks. Begin setup. Space. The local neighborhood. Before you and after you, we will remain. We have looked to the stars for 10,000 years, from the time before the early orbiters to the first colonies on Mars and the breakthroughs that let us travel to the nearby stars. We wanted to go. We wanted to go out, to find what we could, to discover what we didn't know. So we did. We moved out among the stars in our local neighborhood. We made friends and discovered new worlds. We learned. We built better ships. We rediscovered ancient technologies. We kept going. The Central Alliance was founded on Dagon in the Fomalhaut system as a forum to give the local neighborhood a way to handle trade issues and to protect each other. As time went by, the Alliance became a federation of systems with a governing High Council. They recognized the need to keep in contact and protect each other. They also needed to reach out to potential new allies and trading partners. They knew the risks of making first contact. They needed special teams and a training program. So the Central Alliance High Council asked the Masters of Ras'alhague to create a training program. The Masters were widely known and highly respected as keepers of the 5 elements: metal, water, wood, fire, and earth, and as adepts in the ancient arts of healing and fighting. The Council of 9 agreed to create a program that would both reveal the character of the person and prepare those who could complete it to become one of these specially trained first contact ambassadors. It took a generation to develop the program and a few more to refine it. As time went by, the training became quite famous for its rigor and for the respect its graduates earned. Being able to complete the application requesting admission to the program required extensive preparation. Applicants were required to have studied multiple languages, historical perspectives, and all the core philosophies and ideas of at least one civilization throughout its development. The physical requirements were more demanding. It was expected that these ambassadors be able to evade, capture, fight, and improvise as needed. The training to become keepers of the elements, as well as adepts in the ancient arts, would serve them well. The masters were selective about who they accepted for the program. It wasn't always the best of the best. It wasn't always by referral either. They looked for the ones who had overcome some difficulty, the ones who knew what hardship was, the ones who had the potential to achieve more, and the character, determination, and will to make it happen. Those were the ones they wanted. The program was designed to be hard. If a candidate was not ready for hardship, they could not succeed. The training was holistic and demanding. Agriculture, food, water, what is needed to grow food, how living things prosper and how they die were all essential parts of the training. How to develop character, courage, and build relationships with others was required learning. The trainees learned what it takes to grow food from seeds, what the land and the plants need to survive, how to make medicines from foods and herbs, how to cultivate a garden. They learned how to find and cultivate themselves too. Character development was at the core of the training. As they prepared for graduation, some chose to make healing their focus and went on to further studies in medicine. Most of the graduates became trade negotiators and ambassadors. The graduates were all formidable fighters and clever negotiators. They earned a reputation for being polite, fair, honest, shrewd, and not those to cross. Everyone who completed the program was well received and well liked. Being able to walk into a room or situation and have most everyone feel comfortable was something they all learned to do. It was a required skill. Those who wanted to become ambassadors started out as part of a trade negotiation team to learn the issues for different worlds and what was in the existing treaties. They needed time to build trusted relationships with allies. Among those who became ambassadors, only a few held the First Contact Charter. The First Contact Charter gave the ambassador the full backing of the Central Alliance High Council to make whatever decisions were required without consultations. They were careful in their selections, with requirements for recommendations from colleagues, and one of the Masters at Ras'alhague. After all, the person could be making decisions for the entire alliance. Initializing. The High Council chambers on Dagon. Ambassador Micha Lawrence paced the clean marble floor outside the High Council chambers. A tall set of ornate doors took up most of the inner wall. Well-spaced, woven silk carpets muffled her footsteps. She wasn't tall, she wasn't short either. She was pretty, but not overtly so. Her long, dark blonde hair was braided over her left shoulder. She was dressed in the formal gold and rust-colored robes of a keeper of earth, with a simple dark red woven belt wrapped around her waist. Her ambassador's sash with several medals hung across her right shoulder. She smiled as she looked down at the 8 jewels on her first contact pin, glistening in the clear light from the atrium windows above. The pin had a simple, elegant design. The base was flat gold with a ring of gold braid outside the rim. Frank Drake's iconic pulsar map for the Pioneer plaque was engraved in the center. 8 small jewels were arranged in 3 dimensions to match the relative positions of the 8 original members of the Central Alliance: Sol, Eridani, Procyon, Vega, Altair, Fomalhaut, Ras'alhague, and Aldebaran. I'll be right back. She had been born into a royal family long after the time royalty mattered to anyone. Her family had titles, but not much else. She had wanted to be an ambassador for the Central Alliance since she could remember. In all the videos and stories, it seemed so glamorous and exciting to go to new places and meet new friends. But her parents died when she was a baby, and her grandparents didn't have enough money to send her to the special schools. They weren't supportive either. They didn't think she should aim so high. They wanted her to get a clerk's job or help her grandfather with the printing shop. So she studied at night after work during any free time she had. It wasn't easy helping her grandmother with the chores and working with her grandfather at his printing shop. As she had gotten older, her grandfather had let her help make the old-fashioned, elaborate binding books for the alliance treaties. She'd ask about the treaties and how the ambassadors could get them to agree. Her grandfather would scold her. Leave the questions of how to negotiate trade to others. Don't be so adventurous, he'd say. She tried several times. Finally, she was accepted by the masters at Ras'alhague. Life was primitive on Raz, too. There were a few conveniences. That was part of the training. She was selected to join the House of Two, led by Master Tai Aragon, a keeper of Earth and adept of the 9th level. She became lifetime friends with Centaur, Maru, Galen, and Biani. She earned the honored place of first disciple. It meant that she would inherit the House of Two when Master Tai passed away. She spent time as a negotiator and as an assistant trade ambassador, developing her diplomatic and negotiation skills. She received considerable recognition and a few medals for her work in brokering agreements and settling disputes. After she completed several missions that could have turned out quite differently were it not for her skills, she was offered and accepted a first contact charter. She gained quite a reputation for the dinner she hosted and arranged, with the attendees talking about the food for weeks afterward. She often managed to get agreements signed quickly and to sort out disputes favorably for everyone. Some of the planetary councils had been hostile. She managed to outwit them mostly. She had to fight her way out a few times, too. The inner doors began to open slowly outward. Ambassador Micha Lawrence, the clerk called out. The ambassador took a breath and straightened, confident and humble at the same time. Her robe swayed gently as she walked into the chamber. She moved gracefully with a traveler's determined gait. Worn, well-polished boots covered the space between her robes and the floor. She walked to the center of the room, crossed her arms to her chest with her fists closed, opened her arms to extend both hands palms up, turned them over, and bowed slightly as she brought her hands down to her sides. It was an old-fashioned, elegant gesture the keepers all used. The original meaning was complicated. The common meaning was simply, I offer you peace. She looked up at the council members. The 12 members of the Central Alliance High Council sat on a raised platform in a semicircle around a large open floor. Carved oak columns supported a curved ceiling. Ebony panels inlaid with mother of pearl fronted the council seats, providing an imposing view and a barrier. Each of the High Council members wore a formal black robe with different colored scarves draped over their shoulders and bands on their sleeves to identify their roles on the council and their home planets. High Council President Aliel Sambarak sat in the center chair. Her shoulder-length black hair framed her face. Her antique gold earrings almost matched her eyes. She wore 3 scarves, dark red, yellow gold, and spring green. The green represented Dagon, her homeworld. The red and gold, her roles in medicine and agriculture. Her sleeves were trimmed in gold braid to show her role as High Council President. The clerk and 2 assistants sat at tables just below the council member seats. They were recording the proceedings. My greetings, Madam President, the ambassador said. She looked around the room. My greetings to the entire Central Alliance High Council. How may I be of service, she asked. We have a problem, Minister Daru said. He wasn't much for pleasantries. The ambassador turned to look at him with a questioning gaze and a smile, waiting for him to go on. She wanted to challenge him. Okay, sure. That's why you called me here. Might you be just a little more specific, she thought. But she didn't say it. It wouldn't help. President Sambarik frowned at him and turned to look at the ambassador. We're getting more reports about the Olmeri. Several of our trading partners are reporting problems with their shipments of grains and other staples, she said. What sort of problems, Madam President? The ambassador asked. President Sambarik looked down and shook her head. Disruptions in deliveries, spoiled containers, book shipments not delivered. There are too many things that have not gone smoothly, and now we're getting reports of Olmeri raiders scouting other sectors, she said. She took a breath and sighed. The ambassador frowned. What do our traders say? She asked. They don't, Minister Rang said sharply. They don't tell us anything, nothing. They won't give us any details. All they say is they went to pick up the shipment and it wasn't there. They couldn't get the permit to load it. They were delayed and the shipment was sold to someone else. It's always some excuse, he said. The ambassador listened carefully. He's just repeating the problem. He isn't adding anything new, she thought. Is that what's happening, though, Minister? What have they tried? Why did they fail? She asked. President Sambarik turned her head slightly and looked at the ambassador. That is the question we want you to answer, Ambassador, she said. The ambassador looked at her with concern and raised her eyebrows. I see, she said. President Sambarik shook her head and looked down at a small screen. The latest reports we have are from traders near Kalin in the Hyades cluster, she said. Minister Pergals couldn't resist. And that is where you are going, he said. He wagged his finger at the ambassador. The ambassador turned, shifted backward, and looked straight at President Sambarik, shaking her head ever so slightly. Madam President, the Hyades cluster is well outside the local neighborhood. It will take weeks just to get there, she said. She raised her eyebrows, blinked a few times, and smiled. Please, oh please, tell me that's not where you're sending me, she thought. Minister Daru shifted forward in his chair. Well, yes, Ambassador, that's why we want you to go there. We didn't give you a first contact charter so you could take nice vacations. We'd rather not wait for the Olmeri to come any closer. They have destroyed too many planets already, he said. The ambassador straightened and tried not to frown. You want me to go where and do what? She thought. President Sambarik smiled, nodded, and straightened her shoulders. We need you to get to Kalin and broker a treaty with them before the Olmeri arrive. Do whatever you can to stop the Olmeri, she said. I appreciate your confidence in me, the ambassador said with more than a little skepticism. President Sambarik looked directly at her. She wasn't smiling anymore. We have assigned the Magellan to be your transport and your overwatch. Make your preparations quietly, Ambassador. Don't mention your mission to anyone until you are well underway, not until you are out of the local neighborhood. Even your team cannot know, she said. They are used to that, the ambassador said. Whatever you need, Ambassador, President Sambarik said. She looked around the room at the other council members as if to tell them they should all agree. They all nodded. I'll get the preparations underway, the ambassador said. Quietly, Ambassador. Quietly, President Sambarik said. The ambassador nodded to her again, pasted a neutral smile on her face, bowed to the High Council members, and turned to leave. Oh boy, this is a doozy, but sure, I'll go out there and see what I can do. Thanks ever so, she thought. Confirmed settings. The ambassador's apartment on Dagon. The ambassador was sitting in bed with a glass of wine, watching an old Earth film. The sound of music. The comm link chimed. Micha, are you awake? President Sambarik asked. The ambassador sat up, put the wine glass down on the bedside table, and switched on the video. Yes, Eliel, the ambassador replied. President Sambarik's face appeared on the screen. What's that in the background? Children singing? She asked. The ambassador smiled. I'm watching an old Earth film called The Sound of Music. It's about a wealthy family with quite a few children. The children were singing a song about something called a cuckoo. It's lovely, Eliel, just lovely. You'd like it, you would, she said. President Sambarik smiled. Excuse me. President Sambarak smiled. I saw that film once. I did like the first part with the children singing, but the next part I didn't like very much, she said. She glanced at the almost empty wine glass. How many glasses of wine have you had? She asked. The ambassador raised her hand with the last three fingers up. Just two. I don't really have anything else to do. We're all packed and, well, everything's ready. We're all good, she said. President Sambarak frowned. Everything is ready. Is there anything about that everything I should know? She asked. The ambassador blinked a few times and smiled. No, thanks for asking, though. Everything's good. We're all good, she said. President Sambarak lowered her eyes, shook her head, and looked up. Really? All good? Micah, what did you do? No, no, don't tell me, she said. She raised her hand, palm out, shook her head, and laughed. I don't want to know. I'm sure I'll find out soon enough. I know you too well, she said. The ambassador grinned. Yes, you do. But that's not why you called, she said. President Sambarak shook her head. I wish it was. Traders returning through the Aldebaran system have sent new reports of Olmeri activity along the edge of the Orion Arm. We haven't received reports like this before, she said. The ambassador leaned forward. Like what? She asked. President Sambarak sat back in her chair. Several of our more reliable trading partners for grains and other staples have stopped trading with our buyers. The buyers are unable to pick up their shipments, she said. The ambassador nodded. We knew that was happening. It's part of why I'm leaving in the morning. What's different now? She asked. President Sambarak looked down and shook her head. The traders inquired. The Olmeri replied that it was their choice to trade with others or not, she said. The ambassador sat back. Oh, crap, she said. President Sambarak chuckled. Well, yes, that's one way to put it, she said. The ambassador frowned. They aren't just scouting anymore, she said. President Sambarak shook her head. No, and they are moving more quickly. We received reports from our trading partners in that sector about the Olmeri scouting parties just last year, she said. The ambassador sat back a little more and turned to one side, shaking her head. Did they give you any better idea of what the Olmeri are looking for? What do they want? She asked. President Sambarak shook her head. No, we only know that they seem to be, recoltone planets, harvesting planets, she said. The ambassador squinted and frowned. Récolter pourquoi? Harvesting for what? She asked. President Sambarak shrugged. Je ne sais pas. I don't know. Once they arrive, we lose trade, then communication, she said. The ambassador shook her head and laughed. Hey, Paga, what a mess. And you're sending me to go meet them? Thanks ever so. How is it that you always seem to find the very best assignments for me? She asked. You're so very welcome, President Sambarak said. She grinned, shook her head, and frowned. Micah, if anyone can figure out something, it's you. With everything you know about agribusiness in your training, you are the best chance we have at finding a solution. I don't like sending you out there. Other than some traders, we don't have any allies in that sector. You'll be mostly on your own. We don't have any good options. We need to find out what is going on, and we must find a way to stop the Olmeri before they get any closer. She took a deep breath. You're scheduled to depart first thing in the morning. Try to get some rest now, she said. The ambassador frowned and looked at her sideways. Like I'm going to sleep well after this conversation, she said. I'll be right back. Get another glass of wine and go back to watching your film, President Sambarik suggested. The ambassador grinned. I can do that, she said. President Sambarik shook her head and chuckled. Make sure your alarm is set, she said. The ambassador sat up proudly. Already done, she said. President Sambarik nodded. Micha, I know it won't be easy. Keep your eyes open. Whatever you need, she said. Just ask. Thanks, Mom, the ambassador said. They both laughed. President Sambarik might scold her or question her, but if she needed something, all she needed to do was ask. President Sambarik always found a way. The ambassador lowered her eyes, then looked up at the screen. Seriously, though, Aliel, thank you. I appreciate you looking out for me. You always make sure I have whatever I need, she said. President Sambarik smiled and nodded. Safe journey, Micha. I look forward to seeing you back here in a few weeks, she said. The ambassador nodded. Thank you, Aliel, she said. She closed the comlink, got up and poured another glass of wine. She went back to the bed, took a few sips, curled up with a pillow, and fell asleep just as the lead male character in the film was singing a song about a flower that only grows in the mountains and blossoms in the snow. Edelweiss. Getting ready. The ambassador's apartment on Dagon. The ambassador was curled up on her bed sleeping. The room was quiet and dark. She had a standard garden apartment with a large living room, comfortable kitchen, a bedroom suite, a spare room she used as an office, and a patio. The patio was her favorite place to sit and think. An alarm chime started, softer at the beginning. She switched the alarm to snooze. It went off again. She switched it off and sat up. She rubbed the back of her neck and the sides of her head. Red wine, she muttered, looking at the empty glass. Red wine. She shook her head gently, swung her legs over the side of the bed, started to get up and sat back down. She sat there rubbing her knees for just a minute. Getting up earlier than usual isn't as easy as it used to be. Maybe I should leave this work to someone younger. Stay home, putter in the garden, teach. There are some candidates who showed promise this year. Maybe I should go visit Roz too after I get back, she thought. She stood up and put a wrap over her shoulders. The warm aroma of fresh brewed coffee drifted into the room. She sniffed the air. It was supposed to start at 4, she thought. She looked at the clock. It was just after. She let her nose lead her out of the room. She waved her hand across a small panel as she entered the kitchen. 4 muted lights came on under the cabinets. The coffee was still brewing. She picked up a cup and poured just a bit. She liked a little of the sharp, bitter taste that only very strong coffee had. Brewed coffee was one of the little things she had tried to keep. So many other things she'd had to give up over the years. This small thing she wanted to keep. She held the cup close with 2 hands for just a second. She smiled at the warmth and bittersweet aroma. She walked through the kitchen and opened the door to go out onto the patio. The before morning air was cool and crisp. She turned around and went back to her room. She slid her feet into a pair of slippers and picked up a sweater, putting it on as she went back to the kitchen. She stopped to fill her cup with the now finished coffee and went out onto the patio. It was quiet in the stillness before dawn. Even the birds weren't up yet. She looked up at the stars and thought back to when she first started her training on Roz too. The stars aren't so different there. Not that different at all. Maybe after this mission I will go visit again, she said. She looked up and smiled sadly. I know you're out there, she whispered. She took a sip from her cup and looked out at the back garden. She started pacing along the low stone wall surrounding her patio. There were more shadows than light. It was a quarter moon night. A few crickets chirped in a bamboo stand. An owl called from one of the tall trees. Several dark birds fluttered in and out among the top branches. It's too early for birds, she thought. She shook her head. She stopped pacing and watched the movement. Not birds, bats, she said. She looked down into her almost empty cup and then out at the garden one more time. She paced a little more and shook her head sadly. What do they want? What do the Olmeri really want? What they are doing makes no sense. Why destroy whole planets, she asked. She sighed and went inside. Installing. The ambassador's apartment on Dagon. The ambassador turned on more lights as she went into the kitchen. She refilled her cup, leaned back against the counter, and took a sip. A chime sounded and a comm terminal lit up. She left it on audio only. Namani's clear, resonant voice came through the speaker. "Good morning, Ambassador," he said. The ambassador smiled at the sound of his voice. "Good morning, Namani. You're up early," she said. "It's almost 5:30, Ambassador," Namani said. "So it is. Seems I wasn't paying attention to the time. Thank you for the reminder. With all you have to do to get us ready to leave, I appreciate you making time to call me. I have my coffee in hand. I'll be ready in 30 minutes, the ambassador said. "You're very welcome, Ambassador. Also, those additional supplies you requested," Namani said. He hesitated. "Yes," the ambassador said. She was expecting him to tell her there were a few things he couldn't get. "I have everything you requested," Namani said quickly. The ambassador switched on the video. "You what? You have everything? How did you manage? No, don't tell me. You have everything? Everything really?" she asked. Namani nodded. "Yes, Ambassador. The last few boxes of dried foods and herbs are being loaded on your shuttle. You have a little more luggage than usual, and he cleared his throat. A few cartons were included in the stores we already transported to the Magellan," he said. The ambassador laughed out loud. "Already on the Magellan? Already on board? Oh, really? You're a magician. What did you do? How did you?" Namani smiled proudly. "Nothing too much. Some bargaining here and there. Some of the regular stores the Magellan requested were increased by just a little. A few last-minute boxes went into 2 of the containers. They will notice the wine bottles in the rice bins eventually. I'm afraid we will have to find a way to manually repack those," he said. He was trying not to laugh. It wasn't working. He put his hand over his mouth and chuckled just a little. The ambassador doubled over with laughter. She almost spilled her coffee. "I'm sure we'll find a way to manage. I'll help. The doctor and Beth will too, and Kel. Oh, he's going to enjoy this." "You're amazing, Namani. Thank you," she said. "You're welcome, Ambassador," Namani replied. He smiled bigger. "Thank you again, Namani. I'll see you shortly," the ambassador said happily. She closed the comm link, picked up her coffee, and walked back to her room to shower and get dressed. She'd already set out her travel clothes. Namani is so much more than I could have asked for. Somehow he just knows what to do and how to get it done. I wish the council had assigned him sooner, she thought. She thought back to the day she'd learned he was being assigned to her delegation and their first mission together. Progress report. Recall. President Sambarak's office on Dagon. President Sambarak was seated behind a large, ornate desk in an oval office. Ivory slats filtered through the light from the tall windows behind her. Bookshelves lined the walls. A ficus tree took up one corner. Several plants were set around the room. A plush green carpet with an oval flower medallion had been placed on the hardwood floor in front of her desk. The ambassador was standing on the carpet. President Sambarak frowned and shook her head. "You knew we weren't happy with your went there did stuff summary," she said. She held up a small screen, then put it face down on her desk. "Well, yes," the ambassador replied. "So why didn't you write your reports?" President Sambarak asked. She tilted her head to one side and frowned at the question. The ambassador smiled just a little. "I don't like writing reports," she said. President Sambarak laughed, then frowned. "But you are required to write them. It's not optional," she said. The ambassador turned her head to one side and pouted. "Doesn't make me like doing it," she said. President Sambarak chuckled. "I take your point, but we can't let it continue. We're assigning you an acting chief of staff until you find someone," she said. The ambassador frowned. "I've been looking," she said. President Sambarak raised her eyebrows. "For almost a year?" she asked. The ambassador looked off to one side. "Well," she said. President Sambarak shook her head. "And your last requisitions report?" she asked. The ambassador smiled and shrugged. "What's another case of wine or a few bottles of good sunflower oil among friends?" she asked. President Sambarak frowned. It was more than a few, she said. She turned her head to one side. The ambassador smiled proudly. It was for a good cause, she said. President Sambarak looked at her and shook her head. She picked up another small screen and held it up. Namani and Ramar will be joining your team, she said. The screen showed a formal image of a tall, well-built, dark brown male with a slight blue tint to his hair and skin, a square face and kind, thoughtful eyes. He was wearing an impeccably tailored black dashiki with an intricate gold inlay at the collar. He had a subtle smile that hinted he knew what was going on. The ambassador was curious and a bit taken aback. He looked like he really could get things done. She liked that very much. You're assigning an Elrenim administrator as my chief of staff? You must really want those reports, she said. President Sambarak smiled broadly. Why, yes. Yes, we do, she said. They both laughed. The Elrenim were well known for their administrative logistics and organizing skills. They were exceptional at keeping track of things. Their administrators were some of the most sought after in the Alliance. Having an Elrenim administrator meant all the reports, requisitions, and supplies would be accounted for, reported, and managed. It also meant they'd get their supplies. Besides accounting for things, the Elrenim were experts at acquiring whatever was needed. President Sambarak lowered the screen. We've already spoken with Namani, she said. Oh, the ambassador said, shaking her head. President Sambarak nodded and smiled. Once he gets your backlog cleared and brings your budgets up to date, you can find someone else if you want, she said. The ambassador raised her eyebrows. I haven't met him yet, she said. President Sambarak smiled. Tomorrow, you're scheduled to meet him here to start his orientation, she said. The ambassador shook her head. That seems quick. Monday next week wouldn't be late, she said. President Sambarak sighed. Minister Pergals has been screaming about these reports for weeks. The only way to shut him up was to tell him we would ask Namani if he would take this assignment. Luckily, Namani agreed, so you got him. Now please give me something to placate Minister Pergals. Quickly, she asked. The ambassador nodded a few times. We'll get started in the morning. I didn't realize. Thanks for taking care of it. I'll help Namani as much as I can. We'll get it sorted out. Don't worry, she said. President Sambarak looked up and smiled. Thank you, she said. The ambassador dropped her chin, turned her head, and looked up just a little. Can I go now? She asked. President Sambarak giggled and nodded. The ambassador grinned and turned to leave. Namani had turned out to be so much more than she could have asked for. He naturally took over managing things. He could walk into any room with ease and be at the center of at least a few conversations. He seemed to instinctively know what needed to be done and did it. He was extremely practical, always on time, and he kept track of everything with ease. Better yet, he could bite. Continue. Recall. A resort meeting room on Sirius 7. The ambassador and Namani had gone to Sirius 7 the week after he was assigned. She had been told a senior trade emissary wanted a quiet meeting to discuss some local tariffs related to a new treaty. Nothing unusual about that. The Alliance wanted to get the issue sorted out. The ambassador and Namani walked through a set of glass doors that opened to a 5-story atrium. Small balconies jutted out from each floor. Long philodendrons hung over the railings. This is nice, the ambassador said. She looked up through the skylights. They built a glass mountain and brought the plants inside, Namani said appreciatively. They walked across the rustic tile floor to the front desk. The clerk pointed to an open door at the end of a carpeted hallway behind them. They walked down the hallway to the room. This doesn't seem right. There should at least be a seating area and a couple of side tables. This room looks like it hasn't been used in quite some time, Namani said. I'll be right back. This shelf is a bit dusty, the ambassador said. She traced a line on top of a cabinet. What's over there? She asked. She pointed to a partly open panel in one of the walls. Namani walked over and opened it. He leaned forward to look inside. Storage, he said. The ambassador shook her head. This room is not set up for a meeting, she said. Namani started toward the door. It's not set up for anything. I'll go back to the desk and check. Maybe we got the wrong room, he said. I don't think so. This is where he wanted us to go, the ambassador said. She nodded, then frowned and looked around the room. Why? Namani asked. Just then, another set of side panels in the wall opened. 3 fairly large and not so friendly-looking males came through the opening. They formed a line. The ambassador smiled at them, but her eyes grew cold. Why, indeed? It seems the greeting committee has arrived, she said. Ambassador, Namani said, with a warning in his voice. The ambassador glanced over her shoulder. 4 more scruffy males were coming in through the door. Oh, great, we have an escort, too. Namani, I was told you had some training, she said. Yes, I do, Namani said. Do you know how to use it? The ambassador asked. Yes, Ambassador, Namani said. He smiled just a little as he set his shoulders. He stepped quickly into the space behind the ambassador. He stood facing the 4 coming in through the door. Good, she said over her shoulder. Now would be the time, she said. The 3 thugs that had come through the panel started towards the ambassador. The ambassador waited for them to get closer. The one in the center tried to grab her. She trapped his wrist and twisted into him, breaking his elbow and dropping him to the ground. As she moved behind the first one, she kicked the second one in the groin with a back heel kick and broke his knee as she brought her foot down. When the third one tried to grab her, she trapped his arm and spun into him, dislocating his shoulder and breaking 2 of his ribs. The 4 that had come in through the door separated to form a box around Namani. Namani smiled. I couldn't have set this up better if I tried, he thought. He settled into his legs and dropped his shoulders as he picked his targets. He moved before they could react. He turned to his left, stepping into the first thug with a double strike to his ribs and chin that sent him flying into the wall. He spun around to the opposite corner and took out the next one, and quickly spun toward the adjacent corner to strike the third thug. One more turn took out the last one. The ambassador saw the last turn. She smiled. Fair lady works the shuttle, she said. Namani nodded. I like the turns, he said. It shows, the ambassador said. She grinned her Cheshire cat smile. Namani looked down a little with humble pride, then he looked up and smiled. Seems we may have been in the right place after all, the ambassador said. Namani shook his head and frowned. Right place for what? He asked. The ambassador shrugged and smiled. Someone wanted a meeting with us, didn't they? She asked. Namani nodded. We should go, he said. The ambassador pointed around the room at their attackers on the floor. They will probably need medical attention, she said. Let's call from the ship. We should go, Namani said. He pointed to the door. The ambassador nodded. They left quickly. Finishing setup. The ambassador's apartment on Dagon. The ambassador had showered and dressed. The towels had been hung on the shower door and the sink was clean. She finished tying her hair and stepped back to look in the mirror. She smiled as she fastened her first contact pin to her collar. She was quite proud of the pin. She'd earned it. She wore a simple cream-colored blouse, darker beige tunic, gray pants, and comfortable old shoes. Her favorite red belt was tied around her waist. Some sort of tunic, blouse, and pants were common for travelers on so many worlds. She'd adopted the style. She had long ago learned that if she didn't want to be seen, she should dress simply in neutral colors. It gave her the ability to blend in with the locals just about anywhere, and that had gotten her out of trouble more than once. She looked around the room one more time and turned out the lights as she left. She took a long black coat off the hook by the door and put it on. She activated a comlink. Namani? She asked. Yes, Ambassador, Namani replied. Please let the Magellan know we are on our way, she said. Yes, Ambassador. The others will meet us at the departure gate. We are scheduled to leave at 10 a.m. local time. I received word that the captain would like to see you after you arrive on the station, Namani said. Thank you. I will see you shortly, the ambassador said. She closed the link, picked up her personal bag, slung it over her shoulder, and walked out into the clear morning light. Begin transit. The diplomatic compound garden on Dagon. The sun was just coming up. A slight breeze brought the crisp fragrance of fresh baked bread and hot cooking oil. The ambassador lived in a large building complex that was part of the Central Alliance governing compound. It had a mix of comfortable apartments, shops, and offices, walled gardens with large shade trees, and embedded security. A wide sidewalk circled the flower beds in front of her building. Just beyond the flower beds, the sidewalk split into 3 directions. One direction led to the center of the compound and the High Council chambers. Another direction led to more residences. The third direction led to the North Gate. The ambassador took the path to the North Gate. She liked walking through the gardens. The gardens were a combination of rocks and flower beds with small pools scattered throughout. Today, the larger roses had been trimmed back and were just starting to get new leaves. The groundskeepers had put fresh dirt around some new peonies. A few miniature roses in the next bed were just starting to open. Trees and shrubs along the back walls of the compound made it seem as if they were in a small village, not the center of Dagon's capital city. She frowned a little as she walked through the gate. This mission is going to be difficult anyway, she thought. If only I could figure out how to keep Captain Sorensen occupied with something, so she's not always nagging and complaining, looking for something to criticize. It's really going to be hard to keep out of her way on this one. We're going to need her skills. She's so good at extraction, she muttered. She shook her head and sighed. I don't really want to start out having to argue with her. What does she want to see me about? It can't be good, she thought. She shook her head again. Departing. Transport stations and terminals. Several public transport stations were located just outside the North Gate. The stations were small, open-air buildings with entrances and exits on all 4 sides. The ambassador walked into the station. An array of different-sized platforms took up the center of the floor. It was early and not crowded. 2 other travelers were leaving. 3 had just arrived. The ambassador stepped onto one of the platforms. Planetary departure, she said. She instantly arrived on a similar platform, this time inside a 2-story departure hall. It had wide windows along one wall and shops along another. A few of the shops were open. Travelers went in and out. A young man was sweeping the floor. An older woman was opening one of the shop doors. The ambassador stepped off the platform, took her credentials out of her pocket, and walked across a wide floor to the diplomatic departures channel. The guard looked up from his desk and saw the first contact pin on her collar. He sat up a little straighter. May I see your documents, Ambassador? He asked. The ambassador presented her personal identification and health certifications. Thank you, Ambassador Lawrence. Your delegation has already been cleared. Good luck, he said. He handed her documents back to her. Thank you, the ambassador replied. She bowed a little as she took the documents from him. She turned around to look back one more time as if to record an image of the departure hall in her mind. She hoped things would go well and she'd be coming home in a few weeks, but there was no way to know until she got there. She shook her head, took a deep breath, then squared her shoulders and walked down a short hallway to the transport platform. She smiled. It's going to be another adventure. It's always an adventure, she thought. Arriving. Space station arrivals. The ambassador stepped off the platform on the space station. The transport area on the space station was secure and well lit. It was surrounded by thick glass walls. Only cleared arrivals were allowed. The ambassador went to the diplomatic arrivals lane and handed her identification to the guard. Welcome to Dagon 7, Ambassador Lawrence. Will you be staying with us? The guard asked. No, I'm in transit, thank you, the ambassador replied. I was told my delegation had already been cleared. We're boarding the Magellan and will be departing the station as soon as our supplies are loaded, she said. Yes, Ambassador, your delegation has arrived on the station. Good luck, Ambassador, he said. He handed her credentials back to her. Thank you, the ambassador said. She put her credentials back in her pocket. She stepped into the entry scanner and waited for the full body scan. It only took a second. She left the arrivals area and walked down a long, carpeted, glass-walled corridor to the departure hall. The space station was much busier than the ground station. Passengers and crews were preparing to leave, and others were just arriving. Several ships were docked. The ambassador looked up through the 3-story windows. The Magellan was tethered to a docking pylon just outside. Her clean, classic lines were part of her beauty. The Magellan was designed for speed and agility with considerable visible and not so visible firepower. She was a warship, one of only 5 Lewis-class interstellar ships with both light drive and star drive capabilities. It was fine to spend a few weeks on a ship at light speed, but there were times when being able to skip across a few parsecs in short order was very, very useful. The ambassador had been on the Magellan for several missions. She was very happy the Magellan was going to be her transport. The Magellan was one of the best ships in the fleet. She smiled a little more, remembering that Namani had managed to get everything she asked for. A small group in the uniforms of the Magellan were standing off to one side below the windows. She walked over to them. "Good morning. I'm Ambassador Micha Lawrence. I was told that Captain Sorensen wanted to see me. Could one of you let her know I'm here?" she asked. Everyone in the group turned to face her. "Good morning, Ambassador," they said in unison. A tall, slightly heavy young woman with pixie-cut brown hair was standing just behind the others, looking at a small screen. She looked up, stepped forward, and smiled warmly. "It's good to see you again, Ambassador," Commander Brandon said. "It's good to see you too, Commander Brandon," the ambassador said. Commander Brandon shifted her weight to one side, swallowed in, took a deep breath. Captain Sorensen was promoted and reassigned. Captain Alexander Logan has been given command of the Magellan. He's waiting for you on the observation deck up those stairs, 2nd floor, turn right, she said. She pointed towards an alcove with a stairway on the other side of the departure hall. The ambassador tried not to let her surprise show. This was unexpected. "Thank you, Commander," she said. She took a deep breath. Not having to deal with Sorensen could be a good thing, she thought. She'd heard good things about Logan. He was well regarded and capable, but this would be their first meeting and their first mission. Not my preference, not for this one, she thought, realizing she would need to use the ancient arts to find out who he was. She didn't like doing it, but she was being asked to trust him with this mission and the lives of her team. She needed to know more than small talk would reveal. She went up a short flight of stairs to a landing. She took off her first contact pin and put it in her pocket. Then she continued up the second flight. That's all for now. Join us next time when the ambassador meets Captain Alexander Logan. Captain Logan takes command of the Magellan. The ambassador reveals their mission to her team and the captain. You've been listening to Storytime on channel15radio.com. Old time radio for a new era. Good night.